Hello, and thank you for watching the second installment in my Basics and Not So Basic series on Minecraft. Now, if you watched my other video on how to survive your first day, then you should have a pretty solid idea of how not to die. But I found that a lot of my early mistakes came from not knowing what could and couldn't kill me, so today I'm going to show you every death message that I possibly can. Unfortunately, many of those deaths are pretty difficult to get, so I wasn't able to show all 46, but at least I can show you the ones that I was able to get, as well as to explain how to get the others, presuming that they are still attainable. I'll start with one of the most common types of deaths, falling. If you've done any amount of platforming in Minecraft so far, then you've probably learned that you'll take a small amount of damage if you fall more than 4 or 5 blocks, so that'll be our first death. Next, we'll die by falling from a high place. Generally, that means it was about 6 or 7 blocks up. The next 4 deaths follow the same general outline: falling off a ladder, being shot off a ladder, falling off vines, and being shot off vines. These are supposed to be achievable, however I wasn't able to recreate these death messages, so here's a montage of me trying instead. The next 2 death messages used to exist, but to my knowledge they've actually been removed from the coding entirely. Those are falling into fire and falling onto a patch of cacti. As you can see, I tried my best, but to no avail. Those death messages read "fell into a patch of fire" and "fell into a patch of cacti," respectively. Falling deaths have by far the most variations, but they also have the most ones that I wasn't able to complete. For example, I tried for hours to get the next 3, but was completely unsuccessful. You can be pushed off a ledge by a player or mob, and it will say, "was doomed to fall by the player or mob." And you can also be blown off the edge by a creeper, ghast, or a player-lit TNT. This was particularly annoying because you have to be the exact distance away to make sure that you survive the explosion and still die from the fall. Not to mention that it'll just register as a normal falling death unless the explosion and the fall happen very close together. I had to do a lot of research for the final falling death, at the end of which I realized it wasn't really worth all of the effort to give it more than a couple attempts. Supposedly you can fall out of water, and it will say, "fell out of water." Next comes drowning, which can be very easy to do before you actually get the aqua breathing enchantment. There's the basic drowning, and the elusive trying to escape from a player or a mob. Now, water isn't the only thing that you can die from swimming in, so it's time to say hello to every Minecraft player's favorite buddy, lava. The same rules apply here as for water. There's death from swimming, and death while trying to escape. The next set of deaths are ones that you'll easily come across once you get confident enough to start battling monsters, which are officially called mobs. Each mob has its own slightly unique death message, so let's get them all. There's the skeleton, also known as the skeleton archer, the spider, the zombie, the husk, the slime, the zombie pigmen, enderman, cave spider, silverfish, magma cube, endermite, guardians, shulker, the new polar bear, and the wolf. And there are completely unique messages for being killed by a ghast, a blaze, or a witch. Of course, there are 2 bosses as well that don't qualify as normal mobs. Those are the Wither and the Ender Dragon. There's another unique message from getting killed by a mob or a player who's using a named weapon. Luckily, I'm a member of a private server run by Scape Jester, who was kind enough to help me through all the player-related deaths. Again, I wasn't able to obtain the next two messages, but not for lack of trying. There's a set of messages just for when you've already been weakened and only got finished off by a mob or player. Who would have guessed it, but that says, got finished off by the mob or player. And of course, you can be finished off by a mob or player who's using a named weapon. Understandably, that says, got finished off by a mob or player using the weapon. Arrows have their own set of death messages as well. You can be shot by triggering a dispenser, and you can also be shot by a skeleton archer, which I've technically already shown, but what the heck, here's another one. And again, there's a unique message for being killed by a mob or a player who's using a named bow. If you spend a lot of time in desert biomes, then you'll probably get killed by a cactus at least once. And you could accidentally run into one while trying to run away from a mob. This one was actually really fun to film. Usually I don't mess with TNT just because it's very dangerous even when you're being smart, but there are a couple of messages just for that. There's the basic, oops, I accidentally blew myself up, and you can also be sabotaged by another player if they use flint and steel to set it off. You can always take some advice from anonymous internet comments and die in a fire, or just die while trying to put it out. It's fairly difficult to get the next ones above ground, but it can happen pretty often in the Netherrealm. You can die while fighting when you're still in the fire, and you can die while fighting mobs after leaving the fire. Patch 1.10 added the block of magma, and with it came two new, very interesting death messages. We've all played the floor is lava game at least once, but it's a little bit less fun when it's an actual reality. And as with so many of these death messages, it can be altered if you're being chased by a mob. Now we're starting to get into the ones that are really rare, and most players won't naturally run across them more than a small handful of times. You can starve to death, but they can only kill you if you're in hard or hardcore mode. In survival mode, you can only go down to 1 heart, which means that basically anything else can kill you, but at least the starvation itself won't do it. One of my favorite deaths is via a falling anvil. That's partly because of my channel name, obviously, but it's mostly just because it's such a Looney Tunes sort of death that I basically expect Acme to be written on the side. On a similar note, there is a message for when you have a mod that causes falling blocks to actually deal damage, so unfortunately I can't demonstrate that one right now without a lot of extra work. And while we're talking about falling blocks, you can suffocate by getting trapped by gravel or sand. By the way, this is yet another reason why you should always obey the golden rule of Minecraft. If you're not paying attention while digging down in creative mode, then you can fall into the void below the world. There's supposed to be a technical difference from falling more than 5 blocks into the void, however I wasn't able to get that specific message. I did try a handful of times though. The Elytra is a relatively new item that gives you limited flight capabilities, and with that comes the possibility of crashing and dying. Usually I'm extremely prepared for when I try to collect Wither Skulls to fight the Wither boss, but it's fairly easy to die either way. When attacked by a Wither skeleton, they apply a type of poison aptly called Wither, which deals damage over time. If you ever do PvP, player versus player, then chances are you'll eventually run into someone with the Thorns enchantment, which reflects some of the damage that you deal back to you. And of course, whatever does damage has the possibility of killing you. You can die from a potion of harming. The easy way is just to drink one. The slightly harder way is to have one shot at you from a dispenser, and by the way, this is fundamentally the same as when you die from a witch, which was shown earlier, but I'll show it again too. The absolute rarest death message is to get pummeled by something, but that only happens if you have a mod that makes eggs, snowballs, or ender pearls deal damage when thrown. It should say, was pummeled by whatever killed you, if you did actually manage to do it yourself. You can also trigger it by having a Wither Skull fall on you after its death, but considering that neither of those options was particularly easy to get, I didn't even try. The only other death that is comparatively rare is being struck by lightning. Not only are thunderstorms fairly unlikely in general, but being directly struck is almost impossible. Luckily, I do have my friendly neighborhood server admin to help with that part. If it does happen naturally, it should just say, was struck by lightning. But at least this way you can see what it looks like to be struck by lightning in general, even if I wasn't able to get, the actual text to show up. Thanks again, Scape Jester. And, well, that just about wraps things up. So now you've seen the basics, and the not so basics of how to die in Minecraft. Good luck out there, and try not to die.